Hello everyone and welcome today to our webinar. Thank you for your patience. We're ready to get started to talk about boosting your year-end donations with a plan that starts right now. Really glad you can join us. We have an incredible list of attendees from all over the nonprofit world, literally hundreds of folks joining us because they are ready to get started preparing to have the best year-end fundraising campaign that they can, and that really needs to start now. So we have a lot of great information for you, a lot of information that we want to share to get you started if you're not already thinking about it. We're going to walk through some of the key things your organization should be thinking about now to maximize the returns on your year-end campaign. That's tips and tools that you can bring in help you bring in more funds in December. The agenda we have today walks through sort of the typical flow for planning and actually executing your year-end plan, starting with feeding your list, onboarding and welcoming your new members, and planning your engagement opportunities and donation asks throughout the calendar year, testing and optimizing in preparation for that critical year-end December period, integrating your year-end campaign with multi-channel efforts, and then, of course, celebrating and evaluating your success and planning for next year. And I would note that we have plenty of resources for you that we're going to be sharing after the webinar, including a video of this webinar that we are recording, and a pretty extensive and wonderful document put together by our client services team with some sample emails, a communications calendar, some testing resources, all the things you need to really get started with your year-end fundraising campaign. We are live tweeting today at NP Year-End. That hashtag will be sharing out some key takeaways and having a conversation online. If you want to share with your networks what you're learning on this webinar, we would be honored and would love for you to join in the conversation there. And I should also note that we are taking questions in the chat window on the left-hand side. We'll have time for questions at the end of the presentation and maybe throughout. We would love to make sure that you have your questions answered as much as we can today. And with that, let's move on to some brief introductions. My name is Lawrence Grodeska. I'm the Director of Nonprofit Community here at Change.org. It's my job to help organizations just like yours understand how they can be the most effective and efficient in their online campaigns as possible. That's everything from advocacy to supporter engagement to fundraising like we're talking about today. And really happy to be with you all. Also very happy to be with my amazing colleague, Andrea Wood. And she's a Senior Director of Client Services at Change.org, and I wanted Andrea to say a few words about herself and say hello.
Hi everyone. I have had the privilege for a few years of working really closely with organizations, large and small, to use best practices in online advocacy and particularly fundraising and especially end of year. And I'm very excited to get to connect with all of you today.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. I'm really glad you could be with us. Andrea has some incredible experience in the nonprofit world. I'm going to embarrass her by talking about her incredible work with Quality Ohio a bunch of years back, building an incredible list out of nothing. You know, the elbow grease and blood, sweat, and tears that it takes to really build your supporter list. Andrea's been there and done that, so thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Cool. And I also want to give a quick shout out to my other two fabulous colleagues, Maggie and Tatiana, who are rocking the chat and the tweets respectively, so you might be hearing from them. And before we get started, I also wanted to give some quick background about Change.org. We really are the world's largest petition platform at this point. We have over 40 million users in every country. And our mission is to empower people everywhere to create the change that they want to see. And that's a really audacious mission. But there's a counterpart to our mission, and that is also to empower organizations to build their movements with innovative tools to engage the passionate supporters that you need to be more effective in your work. And we're a B Corporation, that's a social benefit corporation, and we're really working to maximize our impact instead of our profit. And one of the primary ways we maximize that impact is providing organizations like yours the people power for your campaigns. And this is a real loose diagram of how that works. Someone like this fellow pictured here, Zach Walls, who you might remember from some of the big Boy Scouts of America campaigns that have been going on recently. He starts a petition on change.org. Hundreds of thousands of folks join him on our site, gather around him, and we're able to connect those passionate supporters with organizations that need to cultivate new donors and advocates. And our channel, our website, our community is really one of the best places that organizations and nonprofits can go to find the supporters that they need at a speed and scale that's not really possible anywhere else. And we'll be talking about building your list through acquisition and other channels throughout the webinar, so more to come on that. And I also wanted to get just a little bit of a pulse on where you're at. Actually, you know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we ask you to tell us where you're at in your online fundraising, Andrea is going to give us some background on why we should care about year-end.
Sure, and none of this is going to be surprising to most of the folks on the call, but today the theme is getting a jump on planning for year-end giving, because it's never too early, because end of year is such a major cornerstone for nonprofit revenue. And the common statistic is that 40% of annual online donations come in those last couple of weeks of the year, particularly on December 30th and 31st. People in December are thinking about tax deductions, and perhaps more importantly, it's the holiday season. It's literally the season of giving in the U.S. and around the world, and citizens are ready to be asked to donate to causes that they care about this time of year. So, case in point, Earthjustice. So what is the business case for acquiring new supporters so far ahead of December? Our client Earthjustice gave us the okay to share their story of early acquisition. And Earthjustice, for those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, they're dedicated to protecting the magnificent places and natural resources and defending the right of all people to a healthy environment. And you may be familiar with their tagline, because the earth needs a good lawyer.
One of the best taglines ever. We have a jingle for it, but we won't sing that right now.
So they joined Change.org and did paid acquisition throughout 2012, leading up to their end-of-year fundraising push. And in particular, they focused acquisition in July with an eye towards cultivating those folks that they were able to recruit all the way through to end of year and optimize that opportunity to spend an extra 5 months cultivating them. Did the strategy pay off? We're going to tell you a little bit later in the webinar.
Great. And one of the things that Earthjustice does so well, and is also not going to be a surprise for a lot of you, is that they are thinking about the ladder of engagement model to cultivate new supporters and even existing supporters into advocates and donors down the line. Most of you have probably heard about the ladder of engagement. It's a framework that nonprofits often use to map out the deepening levels of engagement they have with supporters. And really, the higher someone climbs, the more involved they become with your organization or your campaign. You can think of it as a journey that you're taking your supporters on to prepare them to donate. And right now, if you're acquiring supporters over the summer, you basically have 4, 5, or 6 months to work them up the ladder and prime them for giving in December. And if we're talking about supporters higher up the ladder, they're already good supporters, they've already donated, you need to maintain that relationship as part of your year-end fundraising campaign. So now is the time. We would love a little bit of audience feedback. Where are you in your planning for year-end fundraising? This is an anonymous poll. This will help us tailor our webinar content just a little bit. Also really curious about just when nonprofits are getting started with their year-end campaigns. And it looks like the resounding response so far, and I'll show you the results in a minute, is that everyone is so busy they're just starting to think about their planning, or maybe they've done some planning. So really great to catch you at this critical moment in the planning session. And here are the results you can see. Really incredible, 55% of folks are just getting into it. For those 3% that are all set, you can depart from this webinar, send us your welcoming and onboarding email templates and your communications calendar, and we would appreciate that. Okay, so let's get into the first step for your year-end campaign, and that is feeding your list. No matter where you are in your year-end planning, what we're going to be talking about really applies. And the first step is making sure that your list is ready to roll. Before we talk about some of the different ways that you can build out your list, wanted to give you some background on the information we're going to be presenting. To demonstrate the full spectrum of year-end fundraising options and opportunities, we've created a fictional or a demonstration organization called Our Families, Our Food. And just real simply, they're a nonprofit focused on initiatives that keep families safe from foodborne illness and unnecessary chemicals and antibiotics in our food supply. They've been around for a few decades, at least in our minds, and most of their donations come from direct mail. But they have started an online fundraising program. It's doing pretty well, maybe about 10% of their yearly income from donations. And in 2013, they really want to blow it out of the water, which is why they're planning now. And that really starts with priming their list. So when I say priming your list, basically what I mean is finding the new supporters to bring into your pool of folks that you're going to be asking to donate at the end of the year. One of the best things that Our Families, Our Food and your organization can do right now is to grow your list. And getting that extra 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 supporters primed to give will really pay off when you make that big donation ask in December. So there's a lot of different ways to find new supporters. We've given some webinars in the past about acquisition sources. We're not going to go into all of them right now. Each one requires different amounts of time and resources and different levels of difficulty. But Andrew's going to talk about one that's become really popular as a way to start that ladder of engagement with new supporters.
Sure. And that common tactic practice is social media, using Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, and it can be a powerful cultivation tool that hopefully yields some list growth along the way. And social media can be a really great chance to stay connected to your core supporters outside of just email or your website. And you can ask them to take action off-platform, importantly, to share your work within their circles of influence and extend the reach of your message. Maintaining social network profiles isn't that difficult, but it can be time-consuming. And it's really important to post interesting stuff that's relevant to train followers to look forward to your posts and to share them and make sure that it's relevant and compelling content and posts that they will want to share and forward on to folks who may also care about your mission. So always ask your followers to share what you put out on your social networking profiles within their own circles.
Yeah, and just one note about the content we're covering today. We'll be talking about direct mail and social media, but most of all, we're really high on email. We just think email has the best response rates, and there's a ton of potential for organizations to be doing more with email. So we're going to be focusing on how your other fundraising efforts can tie into email. And Andrew's point about giving social media followers the opportunity to opt into your email list is a critical one. Next channel for new supporters that you can start doing now over the summer is a great time to do it is face-to-face. Getting out there in the wild and hitting the pavement and having those person-to-person conversations with new supporters that will sign up to your list, hopefully. These supporters are really great because they have a personal connection to someone representing your organization, and they've had a chance to talk to someone face-to-face, which really can mean higher engagement rates down the road for face-to-face supporters. This channel isn't necessarily hard, but you do need to spend some staff time, even if it's training the volunteers that are going to be staffing your events or going door to door. And it's also really critical that you welcome these new supporters as soon as possible. There oftentimes can be a lag between the time you have people join your mailing list at an event and then when you send them a welcome email. But to keep them engaged, to explain to them why they're receiving emails from you, you have to welcome them shortly after you actually shake their hand. And a quick pro tip, if you're using pen and paper, factor in data entry time in your staffing planning and expect to lose almost 15 to 20% of names due to illegibility. That's just kind of one of the challenges about this particular method of acquiring new supporters.
Another great way to find new supporters to add to your list is to do what's known as a list chaperone, or sometimes it's called a list swap, where two organizations basically enter into an agreement to cross-promote an action. So what you want to do is find an organization with a complementary mission, but that has different enough issues and campaigns that the list won't overlap too much. Two good examples of organizations where this could possibly work would be Oceana and the League of Conservation Voters, both in the environmental space, but both also different enough in dealing with different kinds of issues. The bulk of the work in List Chaperone is in the setup and prep work. Contracts, memorandum of understanding, handling of private information, unsubscribes, getting the suppression lists set up, and agreeing upon which actions you're going to send to each other's lists, and then all of the normal stuff that goes along with sending great email, approving content, scheduling tests, and any subsequent messages. The message often gets sent with a lift note, which is basically a short paragraph at the top of the email to ease the audience into an email or to ease them into content that might be from a different organization or an outside partner. And the supporters recruited from a partner's list during List Chaperone or list swap are generally good because they're proven action takers and they're on the list of an organization that has shared values. Another option for growing your list and finding really qualified, engaged supporters is paid acquisition. And paid acquisition has advantages. You know supporters are good if they've taken action or somehow clearly raised their hand to say that they're interested in your mission and the work your organization is doing. This is a good way to build your list quickly as well. But it does require that you have budget available for recruitment of new supporters through paid partners. Some organizations might hesitate at the price tag, but it's really important to keep in mind that even free list growth requires precious staff resources, design time, data entry, etc. And in the case of our demo organization, Our Family, Our Food, they know that food safety was going to be the primary focus of their year-end fundraising campaign, so they made the smart decision to focus their summer acquisition and fall engagement and fundraising campaigns on food safety. So the idea, and this is a great pro tip, is to attract an audience that is compelled by the same issue you're going to be fundraising during end of year. And this tip applies to both free and paid list growth as well.
Thanks, Andrea. And that leads us to our first NP year-end takeaway, which is invest in relationships that will pay off in December. The channels that we've been talking about and the different methods for acquiring new supporters are all things that you can do right now to get that extra lift for your year-end fundraising campaigns and the donation asks that you send out in December. But it's important that you get those folks on your list, you welcome them and onboard them now so that they'll be primed to give. And there was a question from, Erisel about what if the main way we gain followers on our email list is through a form on our website. We're talking specifically about things that you can do that are proactive. Sign-up forms on websites are more of an organic or kind of passive way to find new supporters and grow your list. It's actually not finding them. People are coming to you. You can depend on a certain number of new supporters every month, but it's important, as we're talking about, to feed that list, to build your base so that you have more names and you have more donations in the end. And so we just talked about some free and some paid ways to do that, and hopefully that gives you some inspiration about getting started right now to just to challenge yourself to do some different acquisition methods beyond just your normal website sign-up form. All right, so moving on to the next step in our year-end planning, which is onboarding and planning the rest of your year-end campaign. Once you have those new supporters on your list, you need to start thinking about how to welcome them to your network so that they're engaged from day one. And Andrea, we'd love to hear your thoughts about welcoming new supporters.
Thanks, Lawrence. I can't stress enough how important an onboarding, a really thoughtful, well-planned onboarding strategy is to your overall return on investment and list growth, either paid or free. And the first step in turning a new email subscriber into a donor down the line is make them feel welcome in your network. If a new subscriber doesn't feel welcome and doesn't feel like their contribution is important, they're going to disengage or at worst unsubscribe from your list. So here you see a quick screenshot of a welcome message created for Our Families, Our Food. And it's specifically created for welcoming new supporters from a paid acquisition campaign. So there's some special content to really call out the source of the new supporters that will be receiving this email. That message is queued up and ready to go as soon as the organization receives the new supporter records, in this case from change.org or any free or paid source. So a few important points demonstrated in this welcome message, some pro tips. One is that sharing a video helps give brand new folks to your list deeper education about the issue that they took action on and the kind of work that your organization is doing. And also asking supporters to share that video on Facebook or Twitter can really expand the reach, as we talked about earlier. Getting your new email supporters to connect through sharing your content is a great way to keep them engaged, not just educate them, but also help get your message beyond the usual choir. Continuing the theme of engagement and how engagement and cultivation is important, the next step after a good welcome email is to continue engaging supporters using tactics like this one, which is basically a quick quiz or survey to your full list. And why are surveys a good idea? Instead of burning your list out, asking people to just do stuff for you all the time, you're actually asking them for their feedback on your work. That two-way conversation helps deepen your relationship with everybody on your list. You can gauge which of your planned campaigns will be most compelling by asking your list specific questions about the things that they care about most. Do they care more about GMO labeling or food safety? You can round out the questions by asking a few basic demographic questions as well, just to find out a little bit more about the folks on your list. And it also helps ID some of the very most active people on your list. If they take the time to complete an entire online survey, they probably are going to be particularly responsive if you send them special requests to volunteer or take actions that are higher on the ladder of engagement. Little bit more about content and how crucial really great content is. I don't have to tell you that it really is worth the time and effort. Using best practices like making sure that your supporters are the hero of your organization's success story, particularly in fundraising, is really important. Don't neglect the throwaway emails that are easy to neglect when you're building an email schedule. The automatic thank you messages to donors shouldn't be from a machine. They should actually be heartfelt and real thanks and touch on the issue that compelled the donor to actually open up their wallet. Your calendar is also an opportunity to maximize return on investment in free or paid acquisition. Email is still the most important and powerful tool to engage donors in December. That's why we're focusing on it in this webinar, but it takes smart strategy and planning, including taking care to craft a smart communications calendar for your emails to get the most out of all of that build-up and cultivation and work. Strategically scheduling emails can boost giving. You can build a crescendo and beat the drum up until the last minute on December 31st. Most people on your list will come to expect an uptick in email traffic around that time, and they'll be forgiving. And here's a pro tip. You don't necessarily have to write 6 unique emails for a whole end-of-year series. Most people read 1 or 2 out of the series, and you can see just as much response and save yourself some work by just creatively resending and reformatting your most compelling content with a list note at the top, targeting non-donors, of course. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Andrea. And that leads into our next NP year-end takeaway, that your year-end campaign is stronger than the sum of its parts. whatever channels you use to find new supporters, whatever campaigns or asks or actions you're using to communicate with them and engage them, planning your year-end campaign comprehensively really gives you a big advantage. So define your strategy, figure out your calendar, and then stick with it and raise more money. Our next section is testing and optimization. And testing and optimization is obviously a critical part of any successful online campaign, but testing and optimizing can be particularly impactful to make sure you're maximizing the heavy giving in the holiday season. So one of the interesting ways to approach optimizing your campaign is doing a fall fundraising campaign as a trial run for some of your best ideas. Maybe it might involve matching gift campaigns or other different tactics you want to try out, but the fall is really the last chance you have to do some testing and then optimize based on that testing before the year-end fundraising frenzy. So there are a ton of variables to test, and here are just a few to think about that we think are probably both the easiest and most impactful for your fundraising campaign testing. Obviously, subject lines, example of 2 different lines you might test, pop quiz, what's on your dinner plate, or do you know unsafe food when you see it? People are going to respond differently to different frames and different verbiage, so testing to make sure you're getting the highest click-through and conversion rate is really critical. And really, if you get more people to open your email with a good subject line, you're more likely to get donations from them too. Once you get people to click, though, you also need to be thinking about how to optimize your donation landing page. A couple other ideas here. Everything from colors to images to the size and placement of buttons all affect how well or how poorly a landing page and a donation form perform. It's fairly simple to test donation pages. Just create 2 different versions of your page and send some people to version A and some people to version B and see what the response rates are like and what the donations are like. If you're getting really sophisticated, you can also test the sequence of your asks or the user action flow, and that can dovetail with your email calendaring that Andrea just talked about. So use different types of emails that are at your disposal and see which order generates the best response. So, for example, you might test an email fundraising appeal against an advocacy action email that also happens to have a donation form on the thank you page. And it's possible that after someone takes an action, you might see more donations. We see on a pretty regular basis with our clients that engaging supporters through advocacy actions deepens that relationship and results in more fundraising down the road. Finally, for you real sophisticates out there, over time you might try testing different campaign messaging or themes. And for our example organization, Our Family, Our Food, it might be tracking the response rates of supporters welcome with a GMO campaign versus a food safety campaign. And one thing to note is that you want to make sure that you're not, as Andrea mentioned, it's important to be comprehensive with the themes you're using across your onboarding and donation emails. So don't vary your messaging to your supporters during your campaign. But you could create 2 different cohorts for different campaigns that operate side by side. Some things to think about when you're working on setting up your tests. Just a quick run through. I should say that testing is and will be the subject of many a webinar just on its own merits. But we do want to give you just some things to think about so that you're on the right track when you're setting up your test for your fundraising campaigns. First and foremost, what's the goal of this test? What are you looking to do? Increase conversions and donations, or maybe get people to share? And it's important to keep that goal in mind so that when you determine what you are testing, you can make sure that what you're testing gets you to your goal. So think it through, take some time to plan it all out. And part of that planning is also figuring out how large your test panels need to be. A panel is sort of a group of folks that you're subjecting to a different variable. We can start to talk a little bit here about statistics and how to make sure that the numbers you're getting are actually meaningful. and not only the size of your samples or your panels, your sample groups, but how many times and how long you conduct the test and expose to how many users. These are all getting in sort of the nitty-gritty of statistical analysis, and we'll have a few resources for you in the resources we'll send out after this webinar. But important to think about, because really you don't want to be making changes based on results that aren't truly indicative of that aren't statistically significant. And that concept, if you aren't familiar with it, gets to be a little challenging, but it's definitely important to make sure you're not making changes without good reason. So I'm curious, for all you out there, which of these are you going to be testing before your year-end campaign this year? Email subject lines, landing page, and optimizing your donation forms, or maybe some of you out there are going to be optimizing around campaign theme and messaging. I'd be really love to hear, maybe on Twitter, for any of you that are trying out different themes or messages. Images is probably a no-brainer, and maybe some of you bold folks out there are testing nothing because real MPOs don't test. I don't know. But four folks are testing nothing, which is pretty incredible. 5. Maybe you're just making me happy and giving the results, because I'm laughing. And it seems like email subject lines is by and far the big test for folks, followed by landing page optimization and campaign theme.
This is great.
Yeah, great work out there. Really excited to see you all working on optimizing before that critical year-end giving season in December. All right, last thing I wanted to talk about for testing is that idea of actionable analysis. What I was getting at with the sample size you're looking at and how often you test, making sure that you're looking at the results of your test, when you're looking at the results of the test, you need to make sure you're analyzing those results. And when you're analyzing those results, you need to make sure that you're analyzing based on things that make a difference. Sometimes we get so caught up in what's coming next that we forget to look at the results, or we forget to make sure that they're significant before we act on them. So there's a lot of free calculators online to establish statistical significance, and again, we'll send you some links to those. But really, you need to make sure that your results are significant before making big changes. Also, another thing to think about is that context does matter. There could be variables outside of your control that impacted the results you're seeing. I think a great example of this is sometimes around international crises or natural disasters, for example. That changes the dynamics, the normal dynamics of giving. Also important to note that context between issues is always critical to think about. Don't necessarily judge your results against another organization's results, because especially if they're working on a totally different topic. Animals are just going to raise more money than some more heavier topics. So just take the time to think about the context of your results, and don't overreach when you are analyzing those results. And finally, a word to the wise: keep testing, because things keep changing. And when you continue to test, you're continuing to invest in learning more about your supporters. You want to continue to understand how they operate, what they like, what they don't like, and you're going to be keeping track of that and developing knowledge, but that knowledge is not always going to be the same, especially since there's always list turnover. There's always changes to the constituency of your supporter base. And finally, when you have those results, when you think you know what they mean, you want to optimize based on that testing. And we have here a real quick example of not so good and great online donation forms. On the left is a form that has so many fields, it really would befuddle any user, including myself, compared to a really excellent example from a group called Charity Water. This is probably one of the slickest online donation forms around. When you enter an amount, the payment information opens up below that, but even just getting people engage to enter that first number before they have to enter the additional information is a step in the right direction. So point being is that once you have the information, make those changes so that when you're sending out the emails and directing people to your online donation forms in December, you know you're going to get the highest conversion rates possible. And that's our takeaway really for the testing section of this webinar, that test and optimize during fall fundraising so you can apply the best ideas in December. It's really, we've been talking about in the summer, you're building your list, you're finding your supporters so that you have the best response rates and you can get more money in the door. And for testing in the fall, you want to really be making sure that the money that does come in and the asks you're making of those new supporters is as effective and the conversion rates are as high as possible. All right, moving on to our next section, Andrea's going to talk to us about multi-channel.
Thanks, Lawrence. So I've seen a couple of questions in the chat around direct mail, and for most organizations, email and direct mail are still going to be the top channels through which donors give during any fundraising effort. Really, the rule of thumb is use every communication channel at your disposal to keep that echo chamber going for cultivation campaigns and for your donation campaigns, including year-end. Keep hammering that hard deadline of December 31st toward the end of the year. Appeal to the reasons people give this time of year. And using all channels, what does it mean? It means on Facebook, posting an image of a thermometer or a compelling photo of your work and asking people to share and like the photo of your campaign. It also means maybe putting a takeover light box on your homepage or a very special splash page during the final couple of weeks of the year. Use a great image on your donation page and share it on Pinterest. If you're lucky enough to have a mobile list, go out to your mobile list with a text-only donation ask that links to your mobile donation page. And in year-end roundup blog posts, maybe by your executive director, include a link to donate as well. Does your organization print and mail out a newsletter? Make sure to include a donation envelope in the last month of the year and a link to a very simple URL for them to donate. Multi-channel means cross-promotion, and cross-promotion can boost giving, keeps the echo chamber ringing, and it's important to promote your mail piece in your email and your donation web forms in your direct mail. If people open their mailbox, grab your mail piece and hit the web instead because they see the short URL and fire up their computer to donate online because it's faster and easier for them, you can bank that donation immediately instead of waiting weeks for their check to arrive. Use unique URLs and promote those unique URLs exclusively in the mail, in your mail pieces, so that you know that they have actually come online from a mail piece. And that way you can track exactly how much is coming from direct mail recipients who opt to jump online to give through that channel versus sending in a check, which is really powerful information to have. And a cross-promotion pro tip, send a Save a Stamp email appeal right before your direct mail piece hits mailboxes. So you're tipping your hand. You're giving your donors a heads up that they're going to be receiving mail within a few days. And here's their chance to give right now online, save a stamp. And you can use this email appeal also as a special touch message sent to your most valuable supporters. It's sort of an insider view into end of year fundraising for this special group of folks.
Great, and I think our takeaway here is that multiple channels create that echo chamber that boosts fundraising. And I always think of that old advertising or marketing adage. It might be an urban legend or wise tale, but someone needs to see something 7 times before they take action. But really, that's what we're talking about with multi-channel. You want to be putting your brand, your campaign, your relationship in front of your supporters multiple times so that they are reminded that they want to give. Okay, that is a whirlwind tour of what your year-end fundraising campaign planning is going to look like this year. And we are now January 1st. It is time to celebrate. Woo! pop the cork, have some champagne. You know, our folks at Our Families, Our Food have worked really hard. It's time to take a break, and everyone that does development work and fundraising, January is a time of general relief and brief respite, but it's important to analyze your results before too long passes. You want to make sure that you're evaluating what was effective and what was not effective, so that in 2014, next June or July, when you start your planning again, you have some concrete ideas about some of the things you want to be testing and doing differently. Again, this is about tracking what's working, understanding your supporters, your relationship with them, how they interact with you, and then improving upon that as time goes on. So one of the things you might do is something like this: evaluate your campaign and the different channels that donations came through. This is just a sample graphic of what it could look like between evaluating list chaperone supporters that came through list chaperones versus paid acquisition through a source like change.org, and maybe AdWords on social media, and then face-to-face events. This is all just, these numbers aren't actual, but I just want to give you sort of a visual idea of what some of the evaluation that you could be doing looks like. And this is critical because it's critical to do in the beginning of the year, because if you're thinking about what was effective, you can also start planning your budget in the beginning of the year so that you have more funds or staffing resources for getting out to events and meeting people that way, if that was an effective channel for donations for you. Or maybe putting more money towards paid acquisition in the new year. So think about evaluate your campaign, and you know, just if you need help around doing this, there's a lot of great firms out there. I'll put in a pitch for our friends at Big Duck who are listening in, and folks at M&R, and really just people out there that know how to do this well. But it's critical to do it to get the most out of your fundraising campaign for next year. And speaking about effective fundraising campaigns, Andrea is going to loop back to our client Earthjustice and what they saw last year.
Yes. So Earthjustice, as I mentioned, ran a number of paid acquisition campaigns on change.org, and they started well early and made the investment. And starting in July, which was, as I said earlier, a full 5 months ahead of the core end-of-year fundraising period. So Earthjustice reported that their July names donated 58% more in revenue than the supporters that they'd recruited from change.org in November. So basically, this for Earthjustice, investing early and cultivating and giving these new list members a few months to fall in love with the work of Earthjustice really paid off.
And I think that's just a great example of how the work you're doing now to grow your list, however you do it, whether it's paid acquisition or face-to-face or social media cultivation, it really is going to pay off for you down the road. And with that, we are at the end of our content for today's webinar. We'll take some questions here in a minute, but I did want to let you know that, as I've been mentioning, we're going to follow up in the next day or two here with an email with the video of this webinar, as well as a document with some great resources, everything from communications calendar to some sample emails that you can tailor to meet your organization and your campaigns. You know, some thoughts on tracking social media supporters, some fall fundraising testing ideas and resources, and also some additional tips for multi-channel integration. So we want to make sure that you have the resources you need, and hopefully after today you have the inspiration you need to get started to really plan and to have a incredibly effective and bang-up year-end fundraising campaign. And really, want to leave you the thought that your year-end planning starts now. So if you want to contact us or connect with us online, you can do that at change.org/organizations. We are on Twitter and Facebook. would love to have you follow along. We try and share some of the best nonprofit tech news out there, and would welcome your eyeballs on our profiles, and also would love to hear from you either through social media, or my email is up there if you have any questions or want to know more about paid acquisition through change.org. Please contact us, and we would be happy to talk more. And if you have to jump off right now, please feel free to do so. It's been wonderful having you all on here. I hope that your fall fundraising or your end of year fundraising campaigns are incredible, that you beat your efforts last year, and we would love to hear about it. If you have any great successes from things that you learned about on this webinar, shoot us an email, tweet at us. It would be great to hear, because we love to share those kind of stories with our audience and folks just like you. So thank you if you have to jump, and for right now, we'll turn our attention to some questions. And let's see. So the first question is that we'll try and answer here. Is it good to invite people to give all through the year as well as have a big push in December? Andrew, do you have some thoughts on that?
I would say definitely yes. Most of the organizations that I've consulted for and worked with through change.org definitely don't put all of their eggs in one basket in December. They also either plan for even as often as a quarterly fundraising campaign, or they tag fundraising opportunities for supporters during peak periods where there's a big issue in the news, there's a big bill moving, and it's an opportunity to reach out and ask people to support your efforts in those moments. So that's sort of generally what I would say. There are some organizations that really focus a lot of energy at end of year, and unless you have a really compelling reason to only raise money in end of year, I would say it's really important to think about at least one, maybe two other opportunities to ask folks to support your organization by opening up their wallet.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. Question from Patrick about what groups can do in terms of face-to-face cultivation. I'll take a stab at this, and Andrea, if you have any thoughts, just jump in. You know, we were really talking about meeting people in person and getting them to maybe sign a petition and add their email list add their email to join your list. That's a way that you can start to meet new supporters and have that personal connection, and then follow up with them to really establish that and solidify that connection. There's also some face-to-face stuff that you can do around volunteerism or in-person events. It does take some time to do it authentically and effectively, which is why face-to-face can be a bit more of a challenge for some organizations. Some organizations have volunteer coordinators that handle just that, the in-person aspect of their supporter cultivation programs. But it's an opportunity, I think, to really establish a much deeper connection. And one idea is that if you have high-value supporters that have given over the years, you might find a way to thank them with or connect them with other supporters who are also high-value in their area, to get them more integrated and feeling more of a part of a community around your organization. But that's a question that your organization needs to work out as far as how many resources you put towards that. And really, you can base those resources around, around the testing you've done and the data you have on how effective that supporter channel is for you. Okay. Good question around combining email and postal mail approach for a year-end campaign. Kathleen says we normally do postal mail, one zip code for target community. But Andrea, any thoughts that you have around how to effectively combine email and direct mail?
I think we sort of covered it in the presentation. It's really important to use all of the channels you have available, and doing smart cross-promotion and really giving people lots of different opportunities and channels to donate is always going to work well. Lifetime value tends to be higher for people that are put into multiple channels and aren't just siloed in one particular channel, either online or offline giving.
Yeah, and one option is potentially doing something like a data append. If you have a physical address for someone, you could potentially partner with a third party that could map that address to an email or vice versa. That's a bit more sophisticated and does require some investment, but it might be a way to expand your multi-channel and get more folks in different channels of your fundraising campaigns. Okay, interesting question about email volume on December 31st. Jay Hasselwood says, how many emails do you recommend sending on December 31st? I've seen an increase over the years.
It's really hard to say without seeing your own results for your particular organization. I know some organizations that send 3 or 4 and are happy with the results, and some organizations send 1 and are happy with the results. So I would say, do some testing and see what unsubscribe rates look like maybe earlier in the year for a pretty heavy email load. It's also important to keep in mind that folks are expecting more email, and like I said earlier in the presentation, they're not going to read every single one. So a lot of organizations can get away with a much heavier lift. But for your particular situation, I would say you could also split the list in 2 and send a lot of emails to one cohort and just a couple or 1 to another cohort, and see if the unsubscribes are worth the revenue.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about testing in the fall to optimize for your year-end campaign. But if you're serious about optimizing your long-term year-over-year fundraising, there's no reason you can't be testing your year-end campaigns as well. So splitting your list in half and sending half the folks 2 emails and half the folks 4 emails, and like Andrew said, judging donations versus unsubscribe, and maybe thinking about lifetime value or average value per supporter to see how that unsubscribe rate difference between those 2 tactics might impact your year-over-year fundraising projections. All right, some great questions. Really appreciate the questions. If you have them, keep entering the chat. We'll go right to the end of the hour here. So let's see. Speaking about unsubscribes, Neil asked, any advice on fighting high unsubscribe rates? And I'll just start here and say that the best way to fight high unsubscribe rates is to provide content that your supporters care about, and to corollary, be authentic about the stories you're telling. Unsubscribes shouldn't be feared. If people are unsubscribing, there's one of 2 things are happening. You're not providing valuable content, or they don't care about your organization. And in the latter, there's nothing you can do about it, so let them go. In the former, you actually can change that. So you need to be thinking about, and this goes back to the testing and the data and optimizing, what stories play well with the organization, what content do they want. Maybe even doing some focus groups, or when you're talking to people, when you're meeting them out at events. That kind of feedback, even if it's sort of not statistically significant, can be invaluable and help to test over time. So really the best way you can, and we said this in the webinar, is content is king. Just make sure that you're providing the best possible content and invest in it, whether it's images or interviews with constituents or people that take advantage of your services. Whatever it is, invest the time and energy and effort to provide the best content as possible. And then your unsubscribe rates will stay as low as you can hope.
Some really good questions in here.
All right, Andrew, you pick a question this time.
I had to pick a question?
Yes.
Let's see. Sarah Kinney, you mentioned making the donor the hero. Do you have any suggestions of how to do that? Yes, there is an awesome white paper by M&R Strategic Services about how to incorporate good storytelling in fundraising messages. And if it's not there already, we'll make sure it's in the resource document. But it's a really great, easy, accessible, simple resource for how to improve your content and make your supporters the hero of your organization's story.
Excellent.
Let's see. Tim asks, the best way to get paper mail donors to provide email and become part of an e-connection. This is a great question. So 2 things. One is make sure you include, one thing you can do is in your mailer include a very prominent ask for them to provide their email and mention that it allows your organization to save resources and email them directly with donation asks. The other is to use a unique URL for fundraising that's really short and easy to remember so that you're encouraging people who are willing to go online and communicate with your organization can really easily do that. They can sit down with their laptop, have the mailer next to them, type in the URL, and then obviously they have to give you their email address in order to get the auto reply. So those are 2 quick tips.
Yeah, I love those tips. And for myself, I never donate through the mail anymore. It's always online, and I don't like receiving things in the mail, so I always opt, whether it's for my bills or for my communications with organizations I support, I always opt for online communications. And so I think there's a growing population of people out there that are the same, and so take advantage of that and convert them to online.
Mm-hmm. Can I pick one more?
Please, Andrea, pick away.
Patrick asks a great question, which is how to incorporate best practices to reach out to lapsed donors. So Patrick, this is a really great example of how powerful it can be to have a lot of testing data, because basically you want to send folks that are lapsed your absolutely best testing content. So down to subject line, content, the campaign, the particular issue, whatever is performing best among your core activists and your core donors is probably going to give you the best chance to re-engage folks that have lapsed.